The billionaire came home early. His maid grabbed his hand and whispered, "Don't make a sound." What he saw next changed everything. Marcus Way had built his empire on precision and predictability. At 42, he owned 17 hotels across 3 continents, commanded boardrooms with a glance, and scheduled his life down to the minute. Today, however, chaos had intervened. A supplier meeting in Singapore had collapsed after just 20 minutes, leaving him with an empty afternoon and an earlier flight home to San Francisco. His penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of the Millennium Tower, a glass and steel monument to his success. Most days, he barely noticed its beauty, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, the imported marble, the art pieces worth more than most people's homes. It was simply where he slept between 18-hour workdays. The private elevator opened directly into his foyer at 2:47 p.m., 5 hours earlier than usual. Marcus loosened his tie, already thinking about the conference calls he could squeeze in before dinner. The apartment was quiet, bathed in afternoon sunlight that painted golden rectangles across the polished floors. Then he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it, a muffled sob, followed by what might have been a whisper. Marcus frowned. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, was the only person who should be here. She'd worked for him for 3 years, maintaining his home with invisible efficiency. He knew almost nothing about her beyond her impeccable references and the fact that she somehow anticipated his needs before he voiced them. He moved toward the sound, his Italian leather shoes silent on the marble. The noise seemed to be coming from the guest wing, rooms he never entered, kept ready for visitors who rarely came. As he approached the hallway, a figure emerged from the shadows. Mrs. Chen's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes, usually downcast and composed, were wide with urgency. "Mr. Way," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't make a sound." Marcus stiffened. In 3 years, Mrs. Chen had never touched him, never addressed him without being spoken to first. The raw fear in her expression sent ice through his veins. His mind raced through possibilities: an intruder, a robbery in progress, something worse. She pulled him gently but insistently into the study, closing the door with painstaking slowness. Her hand remained on his arm, trembling slightly. "Mrs. Chen, what's—" "Please," she breathed, her accent thicker with emotion. "Please, Mr. Way. I will explain everything. But you must trust me. You must be quiet." He studied her face. She was perhaps 60, with silver-streaked hair always pulled into a neat bun. Her uniform was as crisp as ever, but her eyes held something he'd never seen before, not just fear, but a fierce, protective determination. Against every instinct that screamed at him to take control of the situation, Marcus nodded. Mrs. Chen exhaled shakily. In the guest bedroom, she whispered, her words tumbling out in a rush, "There are 3 children. They are hiding. And they are very, very afraid." "Children?" Marcus's voice rose before he caught himself. "What children?" "Mrs. Chen, what's going on?" Tears welled in her eyes. "My grandchildren, Mr. Way. I have nowhere else to take them. My daughter," her voice cracked. "My daughter was arrested this morning. Immigration. They came to her work, took her in front of everyone. The children were at my apartment. I had to bring them here. I had no choice." The words struck Marcus like physical blows. He knew Mrs. Chen was an immigrant, but he'd never asked from where, never inquired about her life beyond these walls. "I know this is wrong," she continued, words spilling faster now. "I know I have betrayed your trust. You can fire me, call the police, whatever you must do. But please, please, just give me until tonight to find somewhere for them to go. They've been through so much already. Don't let them be more frightened than they already are." Marcus's mind struggled to process this information. Children. Here. In his carefully controlled, meticulously ordered world. How old are they? He heard himself ask. 8, 6, and 4. Mrs. Chen's voice broke. Lily, James, and Sophie. They don't understand what's happening. Lily keeps asking when mommy is coming home. What do I tell her? How do I explain that her mother might be sent away, that they might all be separated? Through the door, Marcus heard it again, that muffled sob, followed by a small voice trying to soothe someone even smaller. Show me, he said quietly. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. Mr. Wei, you don't have to. Show me, he repeated, softer this time. She led him down the hallway with hesitant steps, as if she were walking toward her own execution. At the guest bedroom door, she paused, her hand on the knob. They've been very good, she whispered. I told them they had to be quiet as mice. That it was a game. When she opened the door, Marcus saw them. 3 small figures huddled together on the bed, surrounded by a fortress of pillows. The oldest, Lily, he remembered, had her arms wrapped protectively around her siblings. All 3 pairs of eyes locked onto him with such naked terror that something in his chest cracked open. They weren't just scared. They were petrified, frozen in that primal way of small creatures confronted by something large and unknown. And in that moment, looking at their frightened faces, Marcus Wei realized that everything he thought he knew about his life, his priorities, and himself was about to change. The silence in the room stretched taut as a wire. Marcus stood in the doorway, this titan of industry rendered motionless by 3 pairs of eyes that held the kind of fear no child should ever know. The youngest, Sophie, barely more than a toddler, had her thumb in her mouth, her other hand clutching a worn stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. It's okay, babies, Mrs. Chen murmured, rushing to the bed. She switched to rapid Mandarin, her voice honey-soft, and the children's rigid postures softened slightly, though they never took their eyes off Marcus. He remained frozen, acutely aware of his imposing presence. At 6'2" in a tailored suit, he probably looked like every authority figure they'd learned to fear. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus lowered himself to sit on the floor, his back against the wall. The movement drew startled looks from all 3 children. Billionaires didn't sit on floors. But somehow, it felt important to make himself smaller, less threatening. Hello, he said quietly. I'm Marcus. This is my home. The oldest girl's grip on her siblings tightened. She had her grandmother's eyes, Marcus noticed, dark and intelligent. Her hair was pulled into 2 neat braids, though one was coming loose. There was a juice stain on her shirt, grape, he thought absently. We'll leave, Lily said suddenly, her voice high but steady. We're sorry for being here. We'll go right now. Just please don't call the police. Please don't take us away from Grandma. The words hit Marcus like a punch. This child, this 8-year-old child, was negotiating, trying to protect her family with the only power she had. No one is calling anyone, Marcus said, keeping his voice level. And you're not going anywhere right now. You're safe here. That's what Mommy said, the middle child, James, spoke up, his voice wobbling. She said we'd be safe. But then the men came and took her. Mrs. Chen made a small, wounded sound. She gathered James close, pressing her lips to his forehead. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, complete and utter helplessness. He could negotiate million-dollar deals, could read a balance sheet in seconds, could manage hundreds of employees across multiple time zones. But comforting terrified children? He had no protocol for this. Your grandmother works for me, he began carefully. She's excellent at her job. And she was right to bring you here. This is, he paused, searching for words. This is a safe place. Sophie pulled her thumb from her mouth. Are you the king? She asked, her voice tiny and awed. What? Marcus blinked. Grandma says you're very important. Very rich. Like a king. Her eyes traveled around the room, taking in the crystal chandelier, the silk curtains, the artwork. This looks like a castle. Despite everything, Marcus felt his lips twitch. No, not a king. Just a person who's been very fortunate. Kings have treasures, Sophie continued, warming to her theme. Do you have treasures? Sophie, shoo, Lily hissed, but Marcus raised a hand. It's okay. Yes, I suppose I do have some treasures. He thought of his Monet in the living room, his first edition books, his vintage watch collection. Things he'd acquired because they were what wealthy people acquired. When was the last time any of them had brought him joy? I have a treasure too, Sophie announced, holding up the battered rabbit. This is Mr. Hoppy. Mommy gave him to me when I was born. He's very handsome, Marcus said seriously. I can tell he's been well loved. Can we eat? James asked suddenly. Grandma only brought crackers. My tummy hurts. Mrs. Chen's face flushed with shame. I'm so sorry, Mr. Wei. I can take them to my apartment. No. The word came out sharper than intended. Marcus softened his tone. No. We'll order food. What do you like? Pizza? Hamburgers? 3 sets of eyes lit up with tentative hope. Really? James breathed. Really? But here's the rule, if we're going to eat together, you need to tell me, do you like pineapple on pizza? Because this is very important information. You, no. James made a face. Good answer. Marcus pulled out his phone, then hesitated. He knew the numbers for his office, his lawyer, his driver. But children's restaurants? He looked helplessly at Mrs. Chen. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face as she watched him interact with her grandchildren. Mrs. Chen. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know, you can't know what this means. Marcus felt uncomfortable with her gratitude. He hadn't done anything yet except not call the police. The bar was so low it was practically underground. There's a good pizza place that delivers, Mrs. Chen managed. Giuseppe's. The children love their breadsticks. Marcus ordered enough food for a small army, uncertain of portions. While they waited, Lily ventured a question. Are you going to help Mommy? The hope in her voice was unbearable. I don't know what I can do, Marcus admitted. But I'm going to try. Can you tell me what happened? Whatever you remember. Lily glanced at her grandmother, who nodded encouragingly. The girl's hands twisted in her lap. Mommy was at work. She works at a restaurant, washing dishes. She works really hard. There was fierce pride in Lily's voice. Then these men came in uniforms. They had badges. They said Mommy had to go with them. She didn't do anything wrong. She just didn't have the right papers. She came here to give us a better life, Mrs. Chen added quietly. My daughter, Linda. She's so smart, Mr. Wei. She finished high school, took college classes at night. But the visa expired while she was waiting for the renewal. Just 6 months. 6 months, and they treat her like a criminal. Marcus listened as the story unfolded. Linda Chen, 28 years old, single mother of 3, working 2 jobs to support her children while living with her mother in a 1-bedroom apartment in the Tenderloin. She'd been in the country since she was 15. The children were all American-born citizens, but that meant nothing if their mother was deported. Where's their father? Marcus asked. Mrs. Chen's expression hardened. Gone. He left when Linda was pregnant with Sophie. We haven't seen him since. The food arrived. Marcus had it set up in the formal dining room, then immediately regretted the choice when he saw the children's faces. The room was designed for intimidation, with its 12-foot table and stern portraits of people Marcus didn't know but had bought at an estate sale because his decorator said they added gravitas. This is like a museum, Lily whispered. It is a bit much, isn't it? Marcus found himself agreeing. Tell you what. Let's eat in the kitchen instead. More comfortable. The kitchen was state-of-the-art and barely used. Marcus usually ate takeout at his desk or attended business dinners. But it had a breakfast nook with a bay window, and when they settled there with pizza and breadsticks, something felt right for the first time. Sophie got cheese on her face. James ate 4 breadsticks before touching his pizza. Lily carefully cut her siblings' food into bite-sized pieces, a responsibility no 8-year-old should have to bear. And Marcus, who usually reviewed contracts during meals, found himself simply watching them. Watching the way Sophie's eyes lit up when Mrs. Chen tickled her chin. The way James kicked his feet against the chair, a rhythm of pure childhood energy. The way Lily laughed, really laughed, when Sophie told a knock-knock joke that made no sense. Why did the chicken cross the playground? Sophie asked, giggling. Why? Marcus asked. To get to the other slide. She dissolved into laughter, and soon they were all laughing, the sound filling the kitchen in a way Marcus couldn't remember ever hearing in his home. When had his apartment last heard laughter? When had he? As the afternoon light faded to gold, Marcus made a decision. He didn't know yet what he was going to do or how he was going to do it. But looking at these children, at Mrs. Chen's tear-stained face, at the fragile bubble of safety they'd found in his cold, corporate fortress, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't going to let them face this alone. Night fell over San Francisco, and with it came the reality Marcus had been holding at bay. The children needed to sleep somewhere. Mrs. Chen needed a plan. And he needed to understand exactly what he'd gotten himself into. After dinner, Mrs. Chen had bathed the children in the guest bathroom, another surreal moment when Marcus heard splashing and giggles echoing through his usually silent home. He'd stood outside his office, paralyzed by indecision. He should be making calls. His lawyer. His assistant. Someone who could tell him the right move. Instead, he found himself in his bedroom, opening drawers he hadn't touched in years. At the back of his closet, behind rows of identical suits, he found what he was looking for, a box of his nephew's clothes, left behind after a visit 2 years ago. His brother's family had come for a weekend, and Marcus had been so absorbed in work that he'd barely spoken to them. When they'd left, he'd told himself he'd shipped the forgotten bag. He never had. Now, holding tiny pajamas with dinosaurs on them, Marcus felt the weight of his isolation like a physical thing. His brother had stopped calling. His parents sent obligatory holiday cards. He'd built his empire at the cost of everything else. Mr. Wei? He turned to find Lily in the doorway, wearing one of his old t-shirts that hung to her knees. Her hair was damp from the bath, her face scrubbed clean. I found some clothes, he said, holding up the pajamas. They might fit your brother. Lily's eyes widened. Really? We can use them? Of course. She hesitated, then stepped into the room. This is the biggest bedroom I've ever seen. Is your whole house this big? The whole penthouse, yes. Penthouse, she sounded out carefully. That means the top, right? Like you're the king of the building? Marcus smiled despite himself. Something like that. Lily wandered to the window, pressing her forehead against the glass. The city sparkled below them, a constellation of light stretching to the bay. We can see our apartment from here, she said quietly. Way down there, near that green sign. We're on the 3rd floor, and there's a crack in the window because James threw a ball too hard. Mommy said she'd fix it, but, her voice caught. Marcus crossed to stand beside her. From this height, the city looked like a toy, unreal and manageable. He'd chosen this apartment specifically for this view, a reminder of everything he'd conquered. Now it just made him feel distant from everything that mattered. Your mom is going to be okay, he said, then immediately regretted it. He had no right to make promises he couldn't keep. But Lily looked up at him with desperate hope. Really? You can help her? I'm going to try. It was the only honest thing he could say. Grandma says you're very smart and very powerful. She says you could buy 100 houses if you wanted to. That's probably true. Then why do you only have one? Don't you get lonely? The question struck him silent. Out of the mouths of babes, his mother used to say. This 8-year-old child had identified the central emptiness of his life in a single question. Sometimes, he admitted. Yes. You should get a dog. Dogs are good for when you're lonely. We wanted a dog, but our apartment doesn't allow them. And Mommy said we could barely feed ourselves, so a dog would be. She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she'd revealed too much. Marcus's chest tightened. After dinner, you ate 3 breadsticks and 1 slice of pizza. Your brother ate 4 breadsticks and 2 slices. Sophie ate mostly cheese she picked off the top. Am I right? Lily nodded, confused. I noticed because you made sure your siblings ate first. You kept offering them more, even though you were still hungry. That's what your mom does too, isn't it? Makes sure you eat before she does. Tears welled in Lily's eyes. Don't tell Grandma I said that. Mommy doesn't want anyone to know that we sometimes don't have enough. She's so proud. She works so hard. Marcus knelt down, bringing himself to Lily's eye level. Listen to me. Being hungry is nothing to be ashamed of. Asking for help is nothing to be ashamed of. Your mother is clearly an incredible person, and so are you. You take care of your siblings. You're brave and smart and kind. Those are the things that matter. But we're poor, Lily whispered. The kids at school say we smell like the Goodwill. They say she stopped, biting her lip. The kids at school are wrong. Marcus spoke with a firmness he usually reserved for boardrooms. And I'm going to tell you something I wish someone had told me when I was young. Money is just a tool. I have a lot of it, but that doesn't make me better than anyone else. Your mother, working 2 jobs to care for you. That takes more strength and courage than anything I do. Lily studied his face, as if checking for lies. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she suddenly stepped forward and hugged him. It was brief, awkward. Marcus hadn't been hugged in so long he barely remembered how to respond. But before he could react, she'd pulled away. Thank you for the pizza, she said solemnly. And for not being mean to Grandma. She was so scared you'd yell at her. After Lily returned to the guest room, Marcus stood alone in his bedroom, staring at his reflection in the darkened window. Behind him, the room was a monument to expensive taste. The king-sized bed with its 1,000 thread-count sheets, the custom closet, the bathroom with a shower that had 6 different settings. He thought about Mrs. Chen's 1-bedroom apartment in the Tenderloin, where 4 people somehow made a home. Where children slept on floors and mothers worked themselves to exhaustion and still there wasn't enough. For the first time in years, Marcus felt ashamed of his wealth. Not because he had it, but because of how little he'd done with it besides accumulate more. His phone buzzed. 27 missed calls from his office. 43 unread emails. His assistant had sent increasingly frantic messages about the Singapore deal, a board meeting tomorrow, a dinner with investors he was supposed to attend tonight. Marcus looked at the notifications, at the urgency that had governed his life for decades. Then he looked toward the guest wing, where 3 children were finally falling asleep, probably for the first time since their mother was taken. He silenced his phone. In the guest room, he found Mrs. Chen sitting between the beds she'd made up, one hand resting on Sophie's sleeping form, her eyes distant with worry. Mr. Wei, she stood quickly. I'm so sorry. I should have kept them quieter. Lily shouldn't have bothered you. She didn't bother me. Sit down, Mrs. Chen. Please. She did, perched on the edge of the chair like a bird ready for flight. "Tell me about your daughter," Marcus said. "Everything. When she came here, what her status is, where she's being held. I need to understand the situation completely." Mrs. Chen's hands twisted in her lap. "Linda came with me when she was 15. My husband had just died, and we had nothing left in China. We got tourist visas, planned to go back. But then Linda started school here, and she was so happy, Mr. Wei. She made friends, learned English so fast. She had dreams." The story spilled out in fragments. How the tourist visas expired, how they'd applied for asylum but were denied. How Linda had met a man who promised to marry her, to help with her papers, but disappeared when she got pregnant. How she'd had 3 children anyway, determined to give them the life she'd dreamed of. She was waiting, Mrs. Chen said, her voice breaking. Her lawyer said there was a chance, a program for people who'd been here since childhood. But it takes so long, and the appointments keep getting rescheduled, and now, she covered her face with her hands. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his contacts. He scrolled past business associates, investors, politicians he'd donated to. There, near the bottom, Richard Morrison. College roommate. Now one of the top immigration attorneys in the state. They hadn't spoken in 5 years, maybe more. "Does Linda have a lawyer?" Marcus asked. "A public defender. He seems nice, but he has so many cases. He said it doesn't look good." Marcus nodded slowly. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you're going to call in sick. You're going to stay here with the children. I'm going to make some calls. No promises, Mrs. Chen. The system is complicated, and I don't know if I can help. But I'm going to try." "Why?" The word burst from her like she couldn't contain it. "Why would you help us? I lied to you. I brought them here without permission. I violated your privacy, your trust. Why would you?" "Because it's the right thing to do." The answer came easily, surprising him with its simplicity. "And because I've spent 20 years building an empire, and tonight I realized I have nothing in my life that matters as much as making sure 3 children get to keep their mother." Mrs. Chen's tears flowed freely now. "I can never repay you. I'm not asking you to." Marcus stood, suddenly exhausted. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be complicated." He turned to leave, then paused. "Mrs. Chen. What you did today, bringing them here, trusting me to do the right thing, that took incredible courage. Your daughter raised a remarkable little girl. Lily's lucky to have both of you." In his study, Marcus sat in the darkness, his phone in his hand. It was nearly midnight. Richard would be asleep. This call could wait until morning. But then he thought of Lily's face, of the way she'd made sure her siblings ate first. Of Mrs. Chen's quiet courage. Of Linda, sitting in a detention center somewhere, probably terrified and alone. He dialed. "Hello?" Richard's voice was groggy, confused. "Marcus? Is that you?" "I need a favor," Marcus said. "And I need you to listen, because I'm only going to ask this once." As he explained the situation, Marcus felt something shift inside him. For years, he'd told himself that business was enough, that success was its own reward. But sitting in his study, talking about a woman he'd never met and children who'd been in his home for mere hours, he felt more purposeful than he had in decades. When he finally hung up, Richard had agreed to meet them first thing in the morning. There were no guarantees, but there was hope. Marcus walked through his quiet apartment one last time before bed. In the guest wing, he paused outside the door. Soft breathing, the rustle of sheets, the sound of children deep in exhausted sleep. Safe. For tonight, at least, they were safe. It wasn't enough. But it was a start. Dawn broke over San Francisco with the kind of crystalline clarity that made the city look newly minted. Marcus had been awake for hours, pacing his study, preparing for the conversation ahead. He'd made coffee at 5 a.m., his first time using his own kitchen in months, and now stood at his window watching the city wake up. His phone had been buzzing since 6. His assistant, his board members, his brother. Everyone wanting to know why he'd missed dinner, why he wasn't responding, why Marcus Way, Mr. Reliability himself, had suddenly gone dark. He ignored them all. At 7, he heard movement in the guest wing. Small footsteps padding to the bathroom, Mrs. Chen's soft voice, the sound of a child crying. Sophie, from the sound of it. Marcus found them in the kitchen. Mrs. Chen was trying to soothe Sophie while simultaneously keeping James from climbing on the counter and Lily from attempting to cook eggs on his professional-grade stove. I can do it, Lily was insisting. I make breakfast at home all the time. Let me, Marcus said, startling them all. 4 pairs of eyes turned to him. He was in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater, and he realized they'd probably never seen him in anything but suits. Somehow, it felt important to look less like the man who owned the building and more like someone they could trust. I didn't know you could cook, Mrs. Chen said, surprise evident in her voice. I grew up in a restaurant, Marcus admitted, something he rarely shared. My parents owned a dim sum place in Oakland. I spent every morning before school making dumplings. This was news to everyone, including himself. When was the last time he'd thought about those mornings? The steam rising from bamboo baskets, his mother's hands showing him how to pleat the wrappers, his father's rare smiles when a dumpling came out perfectly. You make dumplings? James's eyes went wide. Can we have dumplings? Not this morning. But soon, I promise. Marcus opened his rarely used refrigerator, grateful that his meal service kept it stocked. How about pancakes? The children's reaction suggested he'd offered them the moon. Cooking was muscle memory. As Marcus mixed batter and heated the griddle, he felt something loosen in his chest. Sophie dragged a chair over to watch, providing running commentary on everything he did. You're very tall, she observed. Are all kings tall? I'm not a king, sweetheart. But you have a castle. And lots of treasures. That makes you a king. Her logic was unassailable. Then what does that make you? Marcus asked, flipping a pancake with a flourish that made her giggle. A princess. She stood up on the chair, wobbling slightly. Mrs. Chen moved to steady her, but Marcus was closer. He caught Sophie as she tipped forward, lifting her easily. Careful, princess. Can't have you falling. Sophie wrapped her arms around his neck, trusting and warm. You smell nice. Like coffee and soap. Thank you. Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to compliments from 4-year-olds. Mommy smells like the restaurant. Like grease and lemon cleaner. I like that smell too. Sophie's face fell. When is Mommy coming home? The kitchen went quiet except for the sizzle of pancakes on the griddle. Marcus looked at Mrs. Chen, who looked helpless. We're working on that, Marcus said carefully. A friend of mine, a lawyer, is going to meet us this morning. He's going to help us figure out how to bring your mom home. Do you promise? Sophie's eyes were so hopeful it hurt. I promise I'm going to do everything I can. It was all he could offer. Breakfast was chaos in the best way. James ate pancakes with his hands until Lily scolded him. Sophie insisted on cutting her own pancakes, resulting in uneven chunks scattered across her plate. Mrs. Chen tried to maintain order while simultaneously looking like she might cry at any moment. And Marcus, who usually ate protein bars while reviewing spreadsheets, found himself laughing when Sophie accidentally flipped a piece of pancake into her grandmother's lap. At 8:30, his doorbell rang. Richard Morrison stood in the hallway, looking exactly as Marcus remembered, wire-rimmed glasses, slightly rumpled suit, the expression of a man who took his work too seriously because lives depended on it. "Marcus," Richard said, surveying him with undisguised surprise. "You look different." "Different how?" "Present. When's the last time I saw you actually here in a moment instead of thinking 3 moves ahead?" Marcus had no answer. He led Richard to his office, away from the children. Mrs. Chen had brought coffee, her hands shaking slightly as she set it down. "Mrs. Chen, please sit," Richard said kindly. "I need to ask you some questions about your daughter." What followed was an hour of painful detail. Richard took notes, asked clarifying questions, his expression growing more serious as the story unfolded. "It's complicated," he finally said. "Linda's been here since she was 15, which works in her favor. The children are U.S. citizens, also helpful. But she's been undocumented for years, and with current enforcement priorities." He trailed off. "What are her chances?" Marcus asked. "With the public defender she has? Maybe 20%. He's overworked, and these cases require intensive documentation, character witnesses, proof of hardship. It's not about innocence, Linda hasn't committed any crimes. It's about building a case for why she should be allowed to stay." "And with you?" Marcus pressed. Richard met his eyes. "Better. Maybe 50-50. But Marcus, I need you to understand what you're getting into. This isn't just about money, though that helps. You'll need to be involved. Character witness, possibly financial sponsor. And even then, there are no guarantees." "I understand. Do you?" Richard leaned forward. "Because this could take months. Years, even. Appeals, hearings, paperwork. And there's a very real chance we could lose, and Linda could be deported, and those children could end up in foster care while their grandmother fights for custody." Mrs. Chen made a small, wounded sound. "We're not going to let that happen," Marcus said with a conviction he wasn't sure he felt. Richard studied him for a long moment. "Okay then. Let's get started." The rest of the morning was a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Richard made arrangements to visit Linda at the detention center. Marcus signed papers designating himself as a potential sponsor, a commitment that would tie him to this family's fate for years. His phone kept buzzing. His assistant had upgraded from concerned to frantic. He had a board meeting in an hour. Major investors were waiting for his call about the Singapore deal. Marcus looked at the children, now settled in his living room with coloring books Mrs. Chen had brought from their apartment. Sophie was lying on her stomach on his expensive Persian rug, carefully coloring what appeared to be a rainbow dinosaur. James was building a tower from couch cushions. Lily sat apart, a book in her lap, but Marcus could tell she wasn't reading, just staring at the pages while her mind churned with worry. He made a decision. "Richard, I need you to handle the detention center visit. Take Mrs. Chen, tell Linda we're doing everything we can." He turned to his phone, composing a message to his assistant. "I'm canceling my meetings today." "Marcus," Richard started. "They need stability right now more than I need a board meeting. I'm staying here." After Richard and Mrs. Chen left, Marcus found himself alone with 3 children, none of whom he knew how to entertain. He stood in his living room, this space designed for entertaining clients and impressing investors, and realized he had no idea what children did. "Do you want to watch television?" he offered. "We don't have TV at home," Lily said quietly. "Mommy says it's too expensive." "Right. Of course." "Games?" he tried. "What kind of games?" Marcus looked around his apartment. He had a vintage chess set worth thousands of dollars. A collection of first-edition books in glass cases. Art that required careful temperature control. Nothing a child could touch. "I have an idea," he said suddenly. "Wait here." He returned 10 minutes later with his laptop and tablet, items he'd been meaning to donate. Have you ever played video games? 3 heads shook in unison. What followed was one of the strangest mornings of Marcus's life. He set up the devices, found some age-appropriate games, and watched as the children's faces lit up with wonder. James couldn't quite grasp the controller, so Marcus sat beside him, helping guide his small hands. Like this, Marcus showed him. Press this button to jump. Why does the character jump? To get over obstacles. Why are there obstacles? Because, that's a good question, actually. Sophie abandoned her game to climb into Marcus's lap, content to watch her brother play. She was warm and solid, smelling of the fancy soap from his guest bathroom. You're nice, she announced. I thought you'd be mean because you're a king and you have a big castle. But you make good pancakes and you let us play games. What made you think I'd be mean? Because Grandma was scared. She's never scared. But yesterday, she was. Shaking. Marcus felt that like a physical blow. Mrs. Chen, who'd worked for him for 3 years, maintaining his home with invisible efficiency, had been terrified of him. And why wouldn't she be? He'd never asked about her life, never shown interest in her as a person beyond her function. I'm sorry your grandmother was scared, Marcus said quietly. She shouldn't have been. She's very important. And brave. What she did, bringing you here, trusting me to help, that was incredibly brave. Are you brave? Sophie asked. I don't know, Marcus admitted. I've never had to be, not really. Being rich makes a lot of things easier. But you're helping us now. Mommy says helping people when you don't have to, that's real braveness. Marcus had built his entire identity on being smart, driven, successful. But sitting there with a 4-year-old in his lap, explaining the basic mechanics of courage, he realized how little any of his accomplishments mattered compared to this moment. Lily had been quiet, but now she set down her book. Mr. Wei? Can I ask you something? Of course. And please, call me Marcus. Marcus, she tested the name carefully. Why are you helping us? Grandma said you're very busy and very important. You could just call the police or send us away. Why don't you? It was the question he'd been asking himself since yesterday. Why had he made that choice? Why was he still making it? Because you needed help, he said simply. And because I realized something yesterday. I've spent 20 years building a business, making money, buying things. But I forgot to build a life. Your grandmother, Mrs. Chen, she never forgot what matters. Family. Taking care of each other. Being brave enough to ask for help when you need it. Mommy never asks for help, Lily said softly. She says we have to do it ourselves, that nobody else will care. Your mom was wrong about that. And that's okay, adults are wrong sometimes too. The truth is, there are people who care. Sometimes you just have to let them. Lily's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared we're not going to see Mommy again. I'm scared they're going to send her away and we'll be alone. Marcus did something he never did. He moved without thinking, without worrying about appropriate boundaries or proper behavior. He opened his arms, and Lily came to him, crying against his shoulder while Sophie patted her back and James pressed close. You're not alone, Marcus said, meaning it with everything in him. I promise you, you're not alone. Mrs. Chen returned in the late afternoon with red-rimmed eyes but something resembling hope in her expression. Richard had managed to get them in to see Linda, had explained the situation, started building the case. She was so thin, Mrs. Chen whispered to Marcus while the children were distracted. So tired. But when I told her about you, about what you're doing, her voice broke. She couldn't believe it. She kept asking why. Why would someone like you help people like us? People like us, Marcus repeated. What does that mean? Poor. Illegal. Invisible. Mrs. Chen said the words without shame, just stating facts. That's what we are in this city. We clean the houses, cook the food, raise the children. But we're invisible until someone decides we're a problem. Marcus thought about the countless times Mrs. Chen had moved through his apartment while he worked, how he'd barely registered her presence. She was right. She'd been invisible to him. "You're not invisible to me anymore," he said. "And we're going to fix this." That evening, Marcus did something unprecedented. He called a family meeting in his living room. The children sat on the couch, Mrs. Chen in an armchair, Marcus on the floor again, a position he was getting used to. "I need to tell you all something," he began. "I talked to my lawyer friend, Richard. He's going to help your mom. But there's going to be a hearing, probably in a few weeks. And they're going to ask a lot of questions about why she should be allowed to stay in the country." "What kind of questions?" Lily asked, her voice small. "About her life here. Her work, her family, her contributions to the community. They're going to want to know what would happen if she had to leave." James spoke up, his voice wavering. "We'd be sad forever." "Yes," Marcus said gently. "That's important for them to know. But here's what I want to talk to you about. Richard says it would help if we could show that your mom has support. People who believe in her, who are willing to help your family." "But we don't have anyone," Lily said, the weight of that truth heavy in the room. "It's just us. Mommy doesn't have friends, she works all the time. And we don't know our neighbors because Mommy says we should keep to ourselves." Mrs. Chen covered her face with her hands. "It's my fault. I taught her to be invisible. To not make waves. I thought it would keep us safe." "It did keep you safe," Marcus said firmly. "You did what you thought was right. But now we need a different strategy. Now we need to make some noise." Over the next few days, Marcus learned more about Linda Chen than he knew about most people he'd worked with for years. Richard had requested character references, proof of employment, evidence of community ties. What he found was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Linda worked 2 jobs, dishwasher at a Chinese restaurant during the day, cleaning office buildings at night. She'd never missed a shift in 7 years. Her employers spoke of her with genuine affection, though they'd paid her under the table and asked no questions about her status. She volunteered at the children's school, despite working 80 hours a week. The teacher showed Marcus a quilt Linda had made for the classroom, stitched together during her rare free hours from donated fabric. She never wanted recognition, the teacher explained. Never wanted to draw attention. But she was always there when we needed help. Always. The children's pediatrician, who treated them at a sliding scale clinic, provided records showing Linda had never missed a checkup, never delayed needed care, despite crushing financial pressure. A picture emerged of a woman who'd built a life through sheer force of will. Who'd raised 3 children while working herself to exhaustion. Who'd remained kind and generous even when she had nothing to spare. And through it all, Marcus kept the children. His penthouse had transformed over those days. Drawings covered his refrigerator. Toys appeared in corners, purchased by Marcus during increasingly frequent Target runs, during which he discovered a whole world of things he'd never known existed. Did children really need special cups? Why were there 17 types of goldfish crackers? His assistant had finally tracked him down on day 3, arriving at his apartment with a tablet full of urgent matters. She'd found Marcus on the floor building a block tower with James while Sophie narrated an elaborate story about dragons. "Mr. Wei," Sandra had said, her voice caught between shock and concern. "The board is threatening to call an emergency meeting. You've missed 6 appointments. The Singapore deal is falling apart." Marcus had looked up from the blocks, really looked at Sandra for the first time in years. She was young, maybe 28, with shadows under her eyes from too many late nights cleaning up his schedule. "Do you have family, Sandra?" She'd blinked, confused. Yes. My parents are in Oregon. When's the last time you saw them? Christmas. 2 years ago. She'd said it like it was normal. Take a week off. Go see them. Paid. When she started to protest, Marcus had held up a hand. The board can wait. The Singapore deal can wait. But time with your parents? That doesn't wait. Trust me on this. After she'd left, looking dazed, Lily had spoken up. That was nice. What you did for her. I should have done it years ago. Mommy says it's never too late to do the right thing. Even if you should have done it before. Marcus had pulled Lily close. Your mom is very wise. But alongside the domestic routine, darker realities loomed. Richard had filed motions, prepared arguments, but he was frank about the challenges. Immigration cases were backlogged. Judges were overwhelmed. And the current political climate made every decision unpredictable. We need something that makes Linda's case stand out, Richard explained during one of their evening strategy sessions. Something that shows not just that she's a good person, but that her removal would cause exceptional hardship. Isn't 3 children losing their mother exceptional enough? Marcus had demanded. You'd think so. But the courts see that argument every day. Richard's frustration was evident. We need more. Community support, economic impact, something that makes her case undeniable. That night, unable to sleep, Marcus found himself in his study, staring at his computer screen. He'd built his fortune on solving problems, on finding angles others missed. There had to be something he could do. He pulled up Linda's employment records, her tax returns, what few there were. Studied the pattern of her life. 2 jobs, always. Money tight, but bills paid. Never late on rent, according to Mrs. Chen. Never asked for help. Marcus thought about his own parents, about the restaurant they'd built through decades of 7-day weeks. How his father had worked until his hands were gnarled, how his mother had never complained about the heat of the kitchen or the rudeness of customers. When had he last visited their graves? When had he last honored what they'd taught him about hard work, about family, about the value of serving others? His phone rang. It was past midnight, but Richard's name flashed on the screen. I found something, Richard said without preamble. Linda applied for a special visa program 3 years ago. For victims of crime who cooperated with law enforcement. Did Mrs. Chen mention this? No. What crime? Domestic violence. Looks like the father of her children, the one who disappeared, he came back when Sophie was a baby. There's a police report. Linda testified against him, helped put him in prison for assault. The prosecutor's office recommended her for a U visa, but the application got lost in the system. Marcus felt ice in his veins. Lost how? Clerical error, looks like. Her lawyer at the time, some overworked legal aid attorney, didn't follow up. The application was never processed. Can we resurrect it? Maybe. If we can prove she should have been granted the visa, we might be able to argue that she's been in legal limbo through no fault of her own. It's a long shot, but... Do it, Marcus said. Whatever it takes. After hanging up, Marcus sat in the darkness of his study. Linda had been beaten, had testified against her abuser, had done everything right, and the system had failed her. And now she was being punished for that failure. He thought about his own privilege, about how different his life would have been if he'd been born without papers, without connections, without the luxury of assuming the system would work for him. In the guest room, Sophie cried out in her sleep. Marcus went to check on her, finding her tangled in blankets, mumbling about her mother. Shoo, he soothed, untangling her gently. It's okay. You're safe. Sophie's eyes opened briefly. Mommy? Not yet, sweetheart. But soon. I promise, soon. As he sat with her until she fell back asleep, Marcus made a decision. He'd spent his life building an empire. Now he was going to use every ounce of that power, every connection, every dollar to fix this one thing. Because if he couldn't help this family, this brave, determined, suffering family, then what had any of his success been for? The hearing was set for 3 weeks away. Richard explained that they needed to build an overwhelming case, something that would make it politically and legally difficult to deny Linda's petition. "We need to show community support," Richard said during another strategy session. "Letters from employers, teachers, neighbors. We need to show she's woven into the fabric of this community." But Linda kept to herself, Mrs. Chen protested. "She didn't want people knowing our situation." "Then we need to change that," Marcus said. "We need to tell her story." What happened next surprised everyone, including Marcus himself. He started by reaching out to Linda's employers. The restaurant owner, Mr. Wong, a gruff man in his 60s, had tears in his eyes when Marcus explained the situation. "Linda is the best employee I've ever had," Mr. Wong said. "Never complains, never late. When my wife was sick last year, Linda stayed extra hours so I could be at the hospital. She wouldn't take extra pay, said we were like family." "Would you write that in a letter? Testify at her hearing?" Mr. Wong didn't hesitate. "Of course. And I'll talk to the other restaurant owners. We all know each other. We'll all help." The building services company where Linda worked nights was next. The manager, a woman named Patricia, pulled out her phone and showed Marcus photos. "Linda decorated the offices for Christmas," Patricia explained. "She didn't have to. She did it on her own time, with her own materials. She said she wanted to make people smile." Marcus looked at the photos, paper snowflakes, carefully cut and hung. Drawings of Santa Claus and reindeer. "It must have taken hours. She's raising 3 kids alone," Patricia continued. "Working 2 jobs. And she still found time to make the office beautiful. That's the kind of person she is." The letters started coming in. Teachers who'd worked with Linda on school projects. The pediatrician who'd reduced his fees when he learned about their situation. A librarian who remembered Linda bringing the children every weekend, helping them pick out books despite being exhausted from work. "They'd stay for hours," the librarian recalled. "The kids reading, Linda sometimes falling asleep in her chair. But she never missed a weekend. Education was that important to her." But it was Lily who suggested the idea that changed everything. "Can we make something for the judge?" she asked one evening. "Something that shows who Mommy really is?" "Like what?" Marcus asked. Lily thought for a moment. "A book. With pictures and stories. About all the things Mommy does. About how hard she works and how much she loves us." Marcus looked at this 8-year-old child with wonder. "That's brilliant." They spent the next week creating it. Marcus bought poster boards and markers. The children drew pictures of their mother, cooking, working, reading them bedtime stories. They wrote stories in their careful handwriting about their favorite memories. Sophie drew a picture of Linda at her restaurant job, surrounded by hearts. "Mommy makes the dishes clean," she'd written in wobbly letters. "She makes everything clean even when she's tired." James drew Linda at his school play, where she'd arrived directly from work, still wearing her hairnet from the restaurant. "Mommy was the loudest clapper," his caption read. Lily's entry was more sophisticated, a timeline of their lives, showing how their mother had juggled work and parenting, never missing a birthday or a school event despite her impossible schedule. But it was Mrs. Chen's contribution that made Marcus's throat tight. She wrote in careful English about her daughter's journey, about a 15-year-old girl who'd learned a new language, adapted to a new culture, and built a life through sheer determination. "My daughter is the bravest person I know," Mrs. Chen had written. "She came to this country with nothing and has given everything to give her children a better life. This is the American dream, isn't it?" To work hard, to sacrifice, to believe that tomorrow can be better than today? Marcus added his own letter. He wrote about meeting the children, about learning what true courage looked like. About realizing that success wasn't measured in dollars but in the lives you touched. I am a wealthy man, he wrote. But Linda Chen is rich in ways I'm only beginning to understand. She has raised 3 remarkable children while working 2 jobs. She has maintained her dignity and kindness in circumstances that would have broken most people. If being American means anything, it means recognizing and honoring that kind of strength. The book grew. Marcus had it professionally bound, turned into something beautiful. But as the hearing approached, he realized it wasn't enough. They needed something more, something that would make Linda's case undeniable. The answer came from an unexpected source. Sandra, his assistant, had returned from visiting her parents transformed. She'd noticed the changes in Marcus, the children in his apartment, and had pieced together what was happening. I want to help, she'd said. Let me coordinate a community event. A rally or a vigil or something. Show public support for Linda's case. A rally? Marcus had been skeptical. Who's going to come to a rally for someone they don't know? You'd be surprised, Sandra had said. People care about this stuff. They just need someone to organize it. Sandra worked her magic. She contacted immigrant rights groups, community organizations, local churches. She created a Facebook event, posted on community forums, reached out to local media. The rally was scheduled for the weekend before the hearing, in a park near the courthouse. Marcus expected maybe 20 people to show up. Over 200 came. Restaurant workers who'd worked with Linda. Cleaning staff who knew the grind of her night shifts. Parents from the children's school. People who'd never met Linda but came because they saw themselves in her story, immigrants, workers, parents trying to build better lives. Marcus stood with Mrs. Chen and the children, overwhelmed by the sea of faces. Signs reading, "Keep families together," and "Linda Chen belongs here," dotted the crowd. A local news crew had shown up. A reporter approached Marcus, microphone extended. Mr. Wei, you're known as one of the city's most successful businessmen. Why are you involved in this case? Marcus looked at Lily, holding her siblings' hands tightly. At Mrs. Chen, tears streaming down her face. At the crowd of people who'd come out on a Saturday morning to support a woman many had never met. Because it's right, he said simply. Linda Chen represents everything we say we value: hard work, family, sacrifice. And we're failing her. We're failing all of them. I'm here because I have the privilege of resources and connections, and I'd be a coward not to use them for something that matters. Some people might say you're interfering with the legal process, the reporter pressed. That immigration law exists for a reason. Immigration law exists to protect American interests, Marcus replied. And it's in America's interest to keep families together. To recognize contribution and character. To not punish people for the crime of trying to build a better life. If the law says otherwise, then the law is wrong. The clip went viral. By Monday morning, Linda's case had become a local cause célèbre. The mayor's office issued a statement of support. City council members called for leniency. The pressure was building. But Richard warned them not to get their hopes up. Public support helps, he said. But judges are independent. They make decisions based on law, not popular opinion. We still need to present an airtight case. The night before the hearing, Marcus couldn't sleep. He found himself in the living room at 3 a.m., staring out at the city. This whole thing had started as a moment of compassion, a simple choice not to call the police when he found children hiding in his guest room. Now it had become something bigger. A referendum on his values, his priorities, his entire life up to this point. If they lost tomorrow, if Linda was deported despite everything, what would that say? What would he tell the children? Can't sleep either? He turned to find Lily in the doorway, wearing pajamas decorated with stars. "No," he admitted. "I'm worried about tomorrow." Lily crossed to sit beside him on the couch. "Me too. I keep thinking about what happens if the judge says no. We'll appeal. We'll keep fighting. But what if we lose everything? What if they send Mommy away and we never see her again?" Marcus had no comfort to offer, no platitudes that wouldn't ring hollow. So he told her the truth. "Then we'll have tried everything we could. And sometimes, that has to be enough." "Is it though?" Lily's voice was small. "Is trying enough when the person you love most in the world is taken away?" Marcus thought about his parents, about how he'd been too busy for them in their final years. How he'd prioritized meetings over visits, business over family. They died knowing he loved them, but had they felt it? Had his love been more than words? "No," he said honestly. "Trying isn't always enough. But giving up guarantees failure. At least this way, we have a chance." Lily leaned against him. "Thank you for not giving up on us." "Never," Marcus promised. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you're not alone. None of you are." As dawn broke over the city, Marcus prepared for the hearing that would determine this family's fate. He put on his best suit, armor for the battle ahead. In the mirror, he saw someone different from the man who'd walked into his apartment 3 weeks ago. The same face, but different eyes. Eyes that had been opened to what actually mattered. In the living room, Mrs. Chen was helping the children dress. Lily in a dress borrowed from a neighbor. James in a button-down shirt Marcus had bought. Sophie in a little outfit that made her look like a tiny businesswoman, which she found hilarious. "I look like you," she giggled, striking a pose. "You look much better than me," Marcus assured her. Richard arrived with final instructions. The children would testify, just briefly, just to let the judge see them. Mrs. Chen would speak about Linda's character. Marcus would explain his commitment to supporting the family. And then it would be in the judge's hands. As they headed to the courthouse, Marcus looked back at his penthouse one last time. Whatever happened today, he knew he'd never see it the same way again. It wasn't just his anymore. It was theirs. A home, not just a house. And he was ready to fight for that with everything he had. The courthouse was an imposing building of granite and glass, designed to intimidate. Marcus had been here before, for business disputes and contract negotiations. But walking through those doors with Mrs. Chen and the children felt entirely different. The hallway outside the courtroom was packed. People from the rally had come, though they couldn't all fit inside. They lined the corridor, holding signs, offering silent support. Mrs. Chen's hands shook as she gripped Sophie's hand. "So many people," she whispered. "I never knew, I never thought." "You're not invisible anymore," Marcus said. "None of you are." Inside the courtroom, Linda waited at the defendant's table with Richard. Marcus barely recognized her. The woman Mrs. Chen had described as vibrant and strong looked diminished, wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hands folded carefully in her lap. But when she saw her children, her face transformed. "Babies," she mouthed, tears streaming down her face. Sophie tried to run to her mother, but Mrs. Chen held her back. "Soon, little one. Soon." The judge entered, a woman in her 50s named Margaret Chen, no relation, known for being fair but strict. She surveyed the packed courtroom with raised eyebrows. "This is quite the turnout," she observed. "Let's begin." What followed was hours of testimony. Richard presented their case meticulously, the documentation of Linda's work history, her community involvement, her cooperation with law enforcement in the domestic violence case. The lost U-visa application that should have protected her years ago. Linda's employers testified. Mr. Wong spoke about her dedication, breaking down when he described how she'd stayed late when his wife was sick. "She told me family comes first," Mr. Wong said, his voice cracking. She said I should be with my wife, not worry about the restaurant. And this is how we treat family? By tearing them apart? The school principal testified about Linda's involvement in her children's education, about the quilt she'd made, about her determination to give her kids every opportunity. Ms. Chen never asked for special treatment, the principal said. Never wanted attention. She just wanted her children to thrive. And they do, because of her sacrifices. Then came the children. Lily went first, small and terrified at the witness stand. Richard asked her gentle questions about her mother. Tell the court what your mother means to you, Richard prompted. Lily's voice was barely audible. She means everything. She works so hard for us. She never complains, even when she's so tired she can barely stand. She reads to us every night, even when she has to go to her second job after. She makes us feel safe and loved, even when things are hard. What would happen if your mother was deported? Lily looked directly at the judge. We'd be lost. Grandma is wonderful, but she's old and she works too. Mommy is, she's the one who knows us. Who knows James is afraid of the dark and Sophie needs her blanket to sleep and I worry too much about everything. She's our mom. You can't replace that. James testified next, telling the judge about how his mother had taught him to ride a bike in the parking lot of their apartment building, holding the seat until he found his balance. She ran alongside me forever, James said. She must have been so tired, but she didn't stop until I could do it myself. That's what Mommy does, she helps us until we can do things ourselves. Sophie was too young to really testify, but the judge allowed her to speak. I miss my mommy, Sophie said, her voice breaking hearts throughout the courtroom. She gives the best hugs. And she smells like home. I want her to come home. Then Mrs. Chen testified, speaking about her daughter's journey, her strength, her character. My daughter made a life from nothing, Mrs. Chen said. She learned a new language, adapted to a new culture, raised 3 children alone while working 2 jobs. She did everything right. And the one time she needed help, when she was being abused, she trusted the system. She testified against her abuser. She cooperated with police. And then the system lost her paperwork and forgot about her. Mrs. Chen's voice rose with passion. Is this justice? To punish someone for the system's failure? My daughter is a good person. A hard worker. A loving mother. She is exactly the kind of person this country should want. If we send her away, what message does that send? That hard work doesn't matter? That being a good parent doesn't matter? That the only thing that matters is a piece of paper? Finally, Marcus testified. The prosecutor, a harried-looking man who clearly would rather be anywhere else, tried to paint Marcus as a wealthy do-gooder who didn't understand immigration law. Mr. Wei, isn't it true that you only met Linda Chen's family 3 weeks ago? That's correct. And yet you're willing to commit to financially supporting them indefinitely? Isn't this just a wealthy man's attempt to buy a favorable outcome? Marcus held the prosecutor's gaze. I met Linda's children 3 weeks ago. In that time, I've learned more about courage, sacrifice, and love than I learned in the previous 20 years of my life. I'm not trying to buy an outcome. I'm trying to do what's right. What's right, the prosecutor repeated skeptically. And you think you're qualified to judge what's right in immigration matters? I think I'm qualified to recognize a good person when I meet one. I think I'm qualified to see a family being torn apart by bureaucratic failure. And I think I'm qualified to use my resources to help fix an injustice. Objection, the prosecutor started, but the judge waved him off. I'll allow it. Continue, Mr. Wei. Marcus turned to address the judge directly. Your Honor, I grew up in a Chinese restaurant in Oakland. My parents were immigrants who worked 7 days a week to build a life here. They believed in the American dream, that hard work and determination would be rewarded. That this country valued contribution over origin. He gestured toward Linda. That's what I see in Linda Chen. Someone who believes in that same dream. Who's sacrificed everything for her children. Who's contributed to her community even while living in fear. If we deport her, we're saying that dream is a lie. That hard work doesn't matter. That being a good parent doesn't matter. That the only thing that matters is having the right paperwork. Marcus paused, gathering his thoughts. I'm a wealthy man, Your Honor. I own hotels, real estate, businesses. But 3 weeks ago, I realized I had no life that mattered. My home was empty. My relationships were transactional. I'd achieved everything I thought I wanted and felt nothing. Then I met 3 terrified children hiding in my guest room. And their grandmother, who'd risked everything to protect them. And I learned about their mother, who'd built a life through sheer force of will. And suddenly I understood what I'd been missing: purpose. Connection. The chance to use my privilege for something that actually matters. He looked at the children, at Mrs. Chen, at Linda. I'm not here to buy a favorable outcome. I'm here because this family changed my life. And because I refuse to stand by while they're punished for trying to live with dignity. I will support them financially for as long as needed. I will provide housing, education, whatever they require. Not because I'm wealthy, but because it's right. The courtroom was silent when Marcus finished. Even the prosecutor looked moved. The judge called a recess to review the evidence. The waiting was agony. The children sat with their grandmother in the hallway, while Marcus and Richard conferred in worried whispers. I think we have a chance, Richard said. The U-visa angle is strong, and your testimony was powerful. But judges are unpredictable. She could still rule against us. And if she does? We appeal immediately. We fight this all the way up if we have to. How long could that take? Years, potentially. And Linda would remain in detention the whole time. The thought was unbearable. Marcus looked at the children, Lily trying to be brave, James fidgeting nervously, Sophie curled in her grandmother's lap. How long could they sustain hope in the face of an endless legal battle? After 2 hours, they were called back in. Judge Chen returned to the bench, her expression unreadable. She looked at Linda for a long moment before speaking. I've reviewed all the evidence presented today, she began. And I've given careful consideration to the arguments on both sides. This is a complicated case, involving questions of law, equity, and basic human compassion. Marcus felt his heart hammering. Ms. Chen, would you please stand? Linda stood, her legs shaking. Mrs. Chen gripped the children tightly. Ms. Linda Chen, the judge continued, you entered this country legally as a minor. Through circumstances largely beyond your control, your status lapsed while you were waiting for the legal process to unfold. During that time, you became a victim of domestic violence. You cooperated with law enforcement in prosecuting your abuser. You applied for a U-visa, which should have protected you. That application was lost due to clerical error, not through any fault of yours. The judge paused, her expression softening slightly. In the 15 years you've been in this country, you have not committed any crimes. You have worked, paying taxes, contributing to the economy. You have raised 3 American children alone, while working multiple jobs. You have volunteered in your community. You have, by every measure except paperwork, been a model resident. Marcus couldn't breathe. The prosecution argues that the law must be applied uniformly, that exceptions breed chaos. And they're not wrong, the law does matter. But the law also must serve justice, not just order. And there is no justice in deporting a woman who did everything right, who trusted the system, only to be failed by that same system. Judge Chen looked at the children. And there is certainly no justice in separating American children from their mother because of a clerical error and a backlogged immigration system. She turned back to Linda. Ms. Chen, I am granting you provisional status while your U-visa application is properly processed. You will be released from detention immediately. You will be allowed to remain in the country with your children while we sort out the paperwork that should have been sorted out years ago. And if anyone in the immigration office has a problem with that, they can take it up with me personally. The courtroom erupted. The children were screaming, crying, trying to get to their mother. Mrs. Chen had collapsed in her seat, sobbing with relief. Marcus felt tears streaming down his own face, not bothering to hide them. The judge raised her voice. Order. We're not finished. The room quieted, though the energy was electric. Mr. Wei, Judge Chen said, looking directly at Marcus. I'm impressed by your commitment to this family. However, I'm holding you to your word. You've promised financial support and housing. I expect you to follow through. I'll be checking in periodically to ensure this family has what they need. Understood? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus managed. I won't let them down. See that you don't. The judge's expression warmed slightly. What you've done here, what you've all done, this is what community should look like. People helping people, not because they have to, but because it's right. I wish I saw more of that in my courtroom. She banged her gavel. Case dismissed. Ms. Chen, you're free to go. What happened next was chaos and joy intertwined. Linda was released from custody right there in the courtroom. She ran to her children, sweeping all three into her arms, sobbing as they clung to her. Mommy! Mommy! Sophie was crying and laughing simultaneously. I'm here, babies. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You didn't do anything wrong, Lily said fiercely. You didn't do anything wrong, Mommy. Mrs. Chen joined the embrace, for generations of strength and love wrapped together. Marcus stood apart, watching, feeling like he was intruding on something sacred. But then Linda looked up at him. Her eyes, so like Lily's, were red from crying but held such gratitude it took his breath away. Mr. Wei, she said, her voice hoarse. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Marcus found his voice rough with emotion. You did all the hard work. You built this family. You raised these incredible children. I just helped a little. You saved us, Linda said simply. You could have called the police that first day. You could have turned us away. But you didn't. You saw us. You helped us. You gave us a chance. Sophie tugged on Linda's sleeve. Mommy, Marcus makes really good pancakes. And he let us play video games. And he's really nice, not mean like we thought kings would be. Linda laughed through her tears. Kings? She thinks I'm a king because I have a big apartment, Marcus explained, feeling absurdly embarrassed. You are like a king, Mrs. Chen said quietly. You have power, money, influence. And you used all of it to help us. That's what good kings do. I'm not, Marcus started, then stopped. Maybe she was right. Maybe having power meant nothing if you didn't use it to help others. Maybe that was the whole point. Richard was packing up his briefcase, looking satisfied. We still have paperwork to file, he warned. The U-visa process will take time. But you're safe now. You can stay, work legally, build your life without fear. I can work legally. Linda's eyes widened. Real jobs? With real pay? Yes. And you're protected. If anyone tries to deport you before the visa is finalized, they'll have to go through me. And I promise you, I won't make it easy for them. Outside the courthouse, the crowd that had waited erupted in cheers when they emerged. News cameras captured the moment, Linda and her children reunited, Mrs. Chen weeping with joy, Marcus standing with them, part of this family in a way he still didn't quite understand but knew was real. A reporter shoved a microphone toward him. Mr. Wei, what are you going to do now? Marcus looked at the children, at Linda, at Mrs. Chen. At this family that had changed everything. Now, he said. Now we go home. 3 months later, Marcus's penthouse had transformed completely. The formal dining room had been converted into a homework space, the table usually covered in books and art projects. The guest wing was now the Chen family's permanent residence, redecorated with bright colors and pictures drawn by the children. Linda was working a single, legal job now, as operations manager for one of Marcus's hotels. It turned out her skills in juggling multiple jobs while managing a household translated perfectly to hotel management. She was thriving, and Marcus was lucky to have her. Mrs. Chen still cleaned his apartment, but now she was also teaching him to cook Chinese food. They spent Saturday mornings in the kitchen, her patient instructions helping him recreate the dishes of his childhood. "Your mother would be proud," Mrs. Chen said one morning as Marcus successfully pleated a dumpling. "I hope so," Marcus replied. He'd visited his parents' graves the week after the hearing, finally. He'd told them about the Chen family, about how 3 frightened children had taught him what really mattered. He liked to think they'd approved. The children had settled into new schools, better funded, with more resources. Lily was excelling, her natural intelligence finally getting the support it needed. James had joined the soccer team. Sophie was in preschool, where her teachers reported she told everyone that she lived in a castle with a king. "She's not wrong," Sandra had commented. Marcus's assistant had become an unofficial part of the extended family, often joining them for the Sunday dinners that had become tradition. Marcus's business had survived his temporary neglect. The board had been concerned, but the positive publicity from the Chen case had actually helped. Investors liked backing people with principles, apparently. Who knew? But more importantly, Marcus had restructured his life. He still worked, still ran his empire. But now he left the office at 6. Now he had dinner with his extended family. Now he helped Lily with her math homework and played video games with James and read bedtime stories to Sophie. His brother had called, shocked by the news coverage. They'd started talking again, making plans for the holidays. His life was fuller, richer, more complicated than it had ever been. And infinitely better. One evening, as Marcus helped Linda prepare dinner while Mrs. Chen supervised the children's homework and Sophie helped by arranging vegetables on the cutting board, Linda spoke quietly. "I've been thinking about that first day," she said. "When you came home early and found us hiding. Everything could have gone so differently." "But it didn't," Marcus replied. "But it could have. If you'd been a different person. If you'd called the police or turned us away. We were at your mercy, and you showed us mercy." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I need you to know, that changed something in me. I'd been so scared for so long. Scared of being seen, scared of asking for help, scared of trusting anyone. But you showed me that there are still good people. People who help because it's right, not because they want something in return." "You helped me too," Marcus said. "More than you know. I was living a life that looked successful but felt empty. Your family showed me what actually matters." Sophie appeared between them, tugging Marcus's hand. "Can we make cookies after dinner? Please. You promised we could try that new recipe. The one with chocolate chips and butterscotch?" Marcus clarified. "Yes. Then yes, we can make cookies." He looked at Linda. "Will you help? Your technique is better than mine." "Only because I've made about 10,000 cookies in my lifetime," Linda laughed. "But yes, I'll help." After dinner, the kitchen was chaos, flour everywhere, chocolate chips being snuck by small hands, laughter echoing off the walls. Marcus looked around at his apartment, at the mess and the noise and the life filling every corner. This, he thought. This is what home feels like. Later, after the children were in bed and the kitchen was cleaned, Marcus stood at his window overlooking the city. Below, San Francisco sparkled in the darkness. Somewhere down there were other families like the Chens, struggling, scared, trying to build lives against impossible odds. He couldn't save them all. He knew that. But maybe he could save some. Maybe that was enough. His phone buzzed. A text from his lawyer. 3 families in similar situations reached out after Linda's case. "Are you interested?" Marcus smiled. "Yes," he typed back. "Send me the details." Because that's what kings did, apparently. They used their power to protect people who needed protecting. They built kingdoms not of wealth and influence, but of family and community and love. And Marcus Way, billionaire businessman, was finally learning what it meant to be truly rich. Epilogue. 1 year later. The Chen family's citizenship ceremony fell on a clear spring morning. Marcus sat in the front row, watching as Linda and Mrs. Chen raised their right hands and swore their oaths as new American citizens. Lily stood tall beside her mother, already a citizen by birth but present to witness this moment. James fidgeted in his suit, excited despite trying to look grown up. Sophie, now 5, wore a dress covered in small American flags and had insisted on bringing Mr. Hoppy to witness history. When it was done, when the certificates were handed out and photos were taken, the family gathered in front of the courthouse steps, the same courthouse where, a year ago, their lives had hung in the balance. "Speech," Sophie demanded. "Kings give speeches." Marcus laughed. "I'm not a king, Sophie." "You're our king," she insisted. And the others nodded agreement. So Marcus spoke, his words simple and from the heart. "A year ago, I came home early and found 3 scared children hiding in my guest room. I had a choice that day, do the easy thing or do the right thing. I chose right, and it changed my life completely." He looked at each of them, Mrs. Chen, now working part-time and taking English classes at the community college. Linda, thriving in her management role and taking business courses at night. Lily, confident and bright, already talking about college. James, happy and healthy, his natural enthusiasm no longer tempered by fear. Sophie, still calling him King Marcus, still making him laugh every single day. "You showed me what family means," Marcus continued. "What community means. What courage looks like. And you taught me that the best investment I ever made wasn't in real estate or hotels or stocks, it was in people. In you." "We love you, Marcus," Lily said, and the others echoed it. "I love you too," Marcus replied, and meant it with everything in him. They went to lunch after, a big, noisy celebration at Mr. Wong's restaurant, where the owner refused to let them pay and kept bringing out more food. Richard was there, and Sandra, and the teachers who'd testified, and the neighbors who'd become friends. At one point, Marcus stepped outside for air and found himself alone with Linda on the sidewalk. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. For seeing us when we were invisible. For helping when you didn't have to. For changing our lives." "You changed mine too," Marcus reminded her. "I was rich and alone. Now I'm rich and have a family. I got the better deal." Linda smiled. "Still. I want you to know, we won't forget this. Any of this. And someday, when my kids are grown, when they're successful and living their dreams, they'll remember that someone believed in us. Someone helped us. And they'll help others in turn. That's your legacy, Marcus. Not the hotels or the money. This." She gestured back toward the restaurant, toward the laughter and joy spilling out onto the street. "That's the thing about kindness," Linda continued. "It multiplies. You helped us, so we'll help others, and they'll help others, and on and on. You didn't just save one family. You started a ripple that's going to touch hundreds of lives." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I just did what anyone should do." "But most people don't," Linda said softly. "That's what makes it special. Inside, Sophie was calling for them, wanting to show Marcus something important, probably another drawing. She'd made about 50 in the past week. Coming. Marcus called back. He looked at Linda. Ready to go back? Always, she smiled. That's what family does, we face things together. And as they walked back into the warmth and noise and love, Marcus realized that somewhere along the way, between that first terrifying moment when Mrs. Chen grabbed his hand and whispered, "Don't make a sound," and this bright morning of celebration and new beginnings, he'd found what he'd been searching for all along. Not success. Not wealth. Not power. But purpose. Connection. Home. And it had started with 3 frightened children, a brave grandmother, and a simple choice to do the right thing, a choice that changed everything.